Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hello.
That's good? We're starting a little bit late. It's good to see so many members, and we have several guests. Thank you for coming and bringing someone with you. At this point, would you please silence your cell phones? I'd like to thank Debbie Maslinsky for last week's program, even though she wasn't able to be with us and is not with us today either. We definitely had some humor provided. It was quite an enjoyable performance for Sue, Melanie, and Peggy, who stepped up to the plate and delivered. Thank you so much. Linda Delaney, who skillfully explained theater and playwriting. Her monologue and her one-act play were delightful. I think Melanie, Peggy, and Sue may have honed their very artful acting performance. They might be taking it on the road soon. You can watch it again on the link which we provide to you with Wednesday Morning Club emails. So if you haven't used the link, it would be good for you to check it out, and just in case you can't be here and you'd like to see a program the following week. Thank you also, Karen Fontana, for the beautiful flower arrangement today. The colors are lovely, they're very soft and definitely very feminine. Thought for today. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have taken a moment to rest, but I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities. Nelson Mandela. Dutch is going to read the minutes from last week's meeting. Dutch.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Either that aisle got very narrow or I got very wide. I don't know. So, I saw that ice cream I've been eating. Anyway, here are the minutes from last week's meeting. President Joan Lamry called the meeting to order at 10:30 a.m. at the Beaches Manor. She thanked current topics chair Cindy Del Piano for bringing County Executive Anthony Vicente Jr. as our speaker on October 22nd. She also reported that last week's program is now available for viewing on our YouTube channel, and an email with the link will be sent out this afternoon. She also announced that Treasurer Linda Berry will be available after today's meeting for anyone who hasn't received their membership book. Secretary Glenda Alvarez read the minutes from the October 22nd meeting. With no additions or corrections, a motion to accept was made by Cindy Del Piano and seconded by Gail Evans. Motion passed with all in favor. Membership Chair Sheila Waters asked Linda Davis to introduce new member Deborah Slagle and Sharon Sanford to introduce new member Jackie Hills. Both were presented with a WMC pin and welcomed by President Lammer. Sheila also reported that she is anticipating a few more openings and has applications available for anyone interested in sponsoring a new member. Program Chair Diane Butcher introduced today's speaker, Linda Bidwell Delaney, a Rome native and award-winning playwright, poet, and lyricist. Her passion for theater and writing began in high school, in college, and professional career working for state government. She explained the structural differences between the various forms of writing, such as skits, plays, and monologues, and entertained the membership with her creative poetic piece, Heartbreak on Board, from an open mic night. Next, the group was entertained by Linda's humorous play, Cluck, which showcased the acting talent of three of our own, Susan Moses as Henrietta, Melanie Spinelli as Chickadee, and Peggy Lazeski as Pie, three aging chickens meeting at a wing bar to discuss the various aspects of their very different lives. Rumors are now swirling that Academy Awards may be in the Three Chickens future come March of 2026. Upon completion of the play, Linda presented the actors with gifts for being such great sports. President Lamry thanked Linda and players for the enjoyable experience and then asked for a motion to adjourn, which was made by Sheila Waters and seconded by Teresa McGibbon. Motion passed. Respectfully submitted, Secretary Glenda Alvarez.
A motion to accept the minutes as read. Linda Davis. Second the motion. Ready? Phyllis Didio. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. At this time, Linda DeBerry will read our treasurer's report for the month.
Good morning, all. This is the Treasurer's Report from the period October 8th to November 5th, 2025. October 8th balance on hand was $9,866.57. We had receipts totaling $1,250 for total funds of $11,116.57. Disbursements included honorariums, lunch reimbursements, postage, bank fee, for total disbursements of $649 in 2025, $10,466.82. Respectfully submitted, Linda DeBerry.
Thank you, Lynn. Can I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Nancy? Can I have a second? Carla Till. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. It may sound like we have a big balance, but by the end of the year, we usually have around 2,000. Like, I know people have asked questions. We also have things like mailing costs and stamps, which we know, who knows what they will cost by next summer. Sheila Waters will give an update on membership, and we do have a new member to introduce today. Sheila?
Do I need to touch this? This is Carol Grognano Manuel, and I am actually her sponsor. Continue to be part of that organization for the next 20 years. During her tenure with the Chamber, Carol served on the membership and professional development committees, among others. She probably served as chairwoman of the board of directors, and she continued to serve on the executive board until she retired in 2022. She is always involved with something. She assisted on the loan review committee for the city of Rome. She was on the DFAST Rome Community Advisory Board. She led as chairwoman of Berkshire Bank's Regional Volunteer Committee in Rome, and she was always leading the charge to raise money and awareness for the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life. She served on the Rome Valley Edge Board of Directors and was an active member of the Rome Twigs and Delta Omega sorority, where she is now a life member. I'm going to skip a little bit. Even after retirement, Carol continues to stay involved. She's an officer on the Rome Industrial Development Corporation. She serves on the Patient Family Advisory Committee for Rome Health and is also on the Rome United Way Fund Advisory Committee through the Rome Community Foundation. She resides in Rome with her husband, Mike. She loves traveling, spending time on the boat, and getting together with friends and family. Her greatest joy is spending time with her children, AJ and Pam, and attending hockey games, dance recitals, as well as many other events for her 3 grandchildren, Kaylee, Jaylyn, and David. Welcome to our Good Morning Club.
If you're looking for someone to do something, you always find someone who's very busy. I think Carol fits that bill. Kathy Kane is going to introduce our author today, and these are some words I would like you to consider before she does that. every American who ever lived, with the exception of one group, was either an immigrant himself or the descendant of an immigrant. John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Kathy?
Well, good morning, ladies and visitors, gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce Marilyn Higgins, who has spent her life living and working in the cities, small towns, and places of extraordinary natural beauty that comprise upstate New York. Her passion for the area's rich history and belief in its profound impact on America's national identity motivated her to write Dreams of Freedom. She imagined the life of a young Irish woman in search of her lost family along the Erie Canal, at a time when the area was a hotbed of dissent and the critical last leg of escape on the Underground Railroad. That energized her in the writing of this novel. Now, Marilyn was the Chief Economic Development Officer for National Grid, and later Syracuse University. She was told intriguing stories and visited mysterious mansions and was shown the hidden artifacts of the Erie Canal communities. Her fascination with these places, where new religions were born and waves of immigrants, abolitionism, women's rights, and Haudenosaunee, oh, I said it, culture intertwined. I practiced that so well. Marilyn is a 20-year volunteer with the Erie Canal Way National Heritage Corridor. She is currently working with the National Abolition Hall of Fame and Museum and her home community of Canastota, New York, to promote the Abolitionist Freedom Walk. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Marilyn Higgins, who just this week announced her novel has been selected by CNY Reads One Book as their 2026 community-wide reading experience. Please welcome Marilyn Higgins.
I'm blown away by this group. You really could take this on the road. This is what makes community, right here, at what's sitting, the people in these chairs. I'm astounded by the smiling faces and the attendance and the excitement that you obviously have done. And working with Kathy has just been wonderful. All my presentations should be as organized as this one. So I'm Marilyn Higgins. I grew up in East Syracuse, and I am so happy to be in Rome because I have wonderful memories of Rome. When I was in 6th grade, my best friend in the world, and you know what that's like in 6th grade, right? Moved to Rome. We grew up in East Syracuse, and she moved to Rome. So my very first train ride was from Syracuse to Rome, and it cost $1.62. I still remember it. And I think you had her as a speaker at one point, Linda Wagner Ginsburg. She grew up here. She was my best friend, and we are still in touch from 6th grade. I just was with her in Albany not too long ago. And but I even remember the dress I wore when I got on that train to go to Rome for the first time. You know, that's such an impression. And her dad had the Mohican Market downtown. So I just have really warm, wonderful memories of Rome. And of course, Rome is where the Erie Canal started. And I'm an Erie Canal addict. I mean, it started when I was young, and it's still a passion of mine, and that is a lot of what drove me to write this book. And I worked with Edge and Steve DeMeo, and so made my way back here many times, and I'm thrilled to be here today. So my goal is to make this woman, Aileen O'Malley, Irish immigrant, Black Irish, synonymous with the Erie Canal the way Anne of Green Gables is to Prince Edward Island. Because I really believe in novel tourism. I think when you combine a place and a book, both become better. So you'll see in some of the, I wrote this little 19-page booklet to encourage people to come to upstate New York and visit the places, the scenes where this unfolds. And it's a real passion of mine. Now that might take a while, because Anne of Green Gables, I think there were 2 movies made, and it was about 100 years ago. And I'm already 73, so I don't know, but it's good to have a goal, isn't it? Oh, let me see here. What I'm going to do is show you the trailer for my book, because that really tells the story, and I don't want to spend our whole presentation telling you the story. So let's see if we can. I'll read it to you then. Got it. No problem. Okay, let me read it to you because it is a little, I see what you mean about the length of the room, it makes it a little hard. An Irish woman's story of love, terror, and a young nation coming apart. In 1833, dark Irish 20-year-old Aileen O'Malley crosses the Atlantic and begins a decade-long journey to find her brother, her kidnapped siblings, and her father. She's stalked by a man she refused to marry in Ireland and is unexpectedly aided in her search by a romantic abolitionist. Their efforts to find the dancers were foiled by prophets speaking of golden tablets, violence, loss, and utopian communities with unconventional practices. She embarks on an activist path to divert her new nation from the cruelty that haunted her native Ireland for centuries. So that's basically the story. Let's see if I can get this. No? There we go. So, as I said, I grew up in East Syracuse. And my addiction to the Erie Canal started at a very young age. I was about 8 years old. And my dad's family, my cousin is here with me today. I don't know if she stepped out. Mary Ann and her grandson Kobe is here with her. And her grandmother and my father were brother and sister. And they were tenant farmers on what was called the Armstrong Farm. Later became Elvina Heights, which is where the Franciscan nuns lived. But it was a beautiful farm. Green Lake was on your right, and if you look down the hill, there was the Erie Canal. So when I was about 8 years old, my dad took me to the farm, and we were walking around, and he told me this story about going down the hill with horses and cutting out ice out of the canal and packing it in sawdust and then dragging it back up the hill to the farm, and that was how they kept their food cold in the winter. And there was something about that story, or my dad telling it to me, I don't know, that stuck with me. And that really began my passion for the Erie Canal. Now, I wanted to write a book about the Erie Canal since I was about 10 years old. And as I said, I'm 73, so things do take me a while. It took me 7.5 years to get out of college. I went to Auburn Community College. And then I went to Oswego State University, waited on tables to get through, and I'm so grateful for the State University system to this day. I mean, what a wonderful opportunity it gave kids like me to get an education. I'm very grateful for it. Then I had a wonderful career. Many of my friends had to leave the area. I'm sure you found that too during the down economic days. And I was fortunate. I was able to find wonderful jobs. And the one that I think about most is Niagara Mohawk. I loved working for Niagara Mohawk. Niagara Mohawk was a fabulous company to work for. They cared about their employees. We had a nurse in the building. You know, I think back what the culture was like there. It was fantastic. But it gave me the opportunity, as I was always on the thruway, going up and down the thruway, visiting our towns and villages. And I would sit in the diner with the mayor and the councilors and say, how are things going? You know, tell me more about your town. And inevitably, they would tell me a story about an invention or something that happened related to the Erie Canal. Little Falls, did you know we were the cheese capital of the world? No. But that's my research for this book. I guess my point in saying that is it was done over a lifetime. And it was done over a lifetime of engagement with fellow canal addicts. So I've been absorbing this stuff for a very long time. Then when Jim Walsh, who was congressman at the time, decided to get this designated as a National Heritage Corridor, which was one of the best things ever done for upstate New York. That's what brought in the National Park Service and has really kept this corridor alive. I worked with him on the legislation, and I've been on that board ever since. When I retired, I quit all my boards, but I kept my canal board. I just love it. But where I decided to write the book, have you ever heard of a town called Garmisch-Partenkirchen? Yay! Okay, all right. After my dad passed away, my two sisters, Carolyn and Patty, and I took an open road experience in Europe. We bought plane tickets and we rented a car. We had no hotel reservations, we had no schedule, anything. One evening we ended up in this town, which is in the Alps, way up in the Alps, in one of those roads that winds around the mountain, called Garmisch-Partenkirchen. And the lady at the house where we were staying pointed us to this restaurant across the street and said, dinner. So we go, okay, off we went. So we walk into this bar, I don't know what to call it, restaurant, what? And it's like one of those ones in the movies where the men are singing. And they've got their mugs, and they're like, and then one table would sing, and then they'd sit down, and another table would sing. We're like this, And they sat us down, Carolyn, Pat, and I, with 12 German bowlers who were there on vacation. Now, they spoke no English, we spoke no German. How are we going to communicate, right? So the guy at the end of the table calls the waitress over, and she brings back in a minute this long wooden paddle with 15 shot glasses. And little American flags in every shot glass. It was so sweet. And I'm trying to find a way to communicate back with them, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. And I start singing. I've got a mule, and her name is Sal. They all knew the song. I mean, my sisters laugh about that to this day. It's like, pretty soon, I've got a mule and her name is Sal. But they knew the song because that's how their ancestors came to America. They knew our history better than we do sometimes. I mean, that was handed down in families. That's how Grandpa went to Minnesota. He went via the Erie Canal, And that night, my sisters and I went back to the room, and they said, I'm writing a book. I've been thinking about it for years. I'm writing a book on the Erie Canal. And that's really when I decided to do it. Let's see if I can get this. So all of you know, because you're from Rome and you've probably been inundated with canal stuff, that the Erie Canal changed New York. It made New York City the port of the world, of our country. It made us the Empire State, right? Now, what a lot of people don't know is the competition for being the premier port in the United States was between New Orleans and New York. So had the canal not been built, New Orleans might have been the primary port, and the Civil War might have turned out differently. Because ideas follow goods and services and thoughts. And it really was what created the path to the American heartland. And you're aware of the Little Falls Chasm. It was the only break in the Appalachian Mountains. And that's why the canal was able to be built. was because of that break. And that little canal, the first one, is 7 million immigrants. And when you think about it, and there's little slow boats, all right? So all the westerns we've seen, right, they're all in Canastota wagons. Well, before they were in Canastota wagons, they were in canal boats, okay? That was the path west. So anyway, you couldn't have a better setting than this for a novel, right? It was such an exciting time. All of America, and even we who live here, fail to appreciate the immensity of what happened along this corridor. First of all, it was the home of the Haudenosaunee, the very basis for the U.S. Constitution. The whole reason there was a women's rights movement was because the Haudenosaunee matriarchal system opened the eyes of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the other early feminists. They had never even dreamed of this before, that women could, you couldn't go to war if the clan mothers didn't approve. That the leaders were chosen by the women. I would trust this group of women to elect anyone, okay? So you had, the other thing that people forget is, and I knew this because of my work in business, that this was the Silicon Valley of its day. I mean, Silicon Valley electricity was invented here. Synthetic penicillin was invented here. The steam engine was invented here. This was the corridor. This is where everything came along this corridor, and that's always where innovation comes from, is when diverse people are mixed together and get with bankers and get with ideas, and things happen. And that was the Erie Canal Corridor, the rapid influx of ideas and people. The other thing that I think is interesting about it is that, have you guys heard of the Burned Over District? You have. That's the term that was applied to this corridor because so many of the immigrants who came here with Calvinistic religious beliefs. They thought their future was preordained. And that's how the old world religions work. But then after they cross an ocean, and they come up the Hudson River, they think, maybe I can figure this out a little differently. So there was a religious fervor along that corridor that was so hot, it became known as the Burned Over District. The Mormons came from Palmyra, a canal town. The Shakers came from Waterloo, a canal town, right? And then you read diaries of people who went up and down the canal, and they'll say, I just saw this town 4 months ago, and it's got 4 new church steeples. The church steeples along the canal, the religions that were formed. And, they pretty much all got along with each other, too, which is kind of amazing, although there was a big anti-Catholic bent then. But the religious fervor that occurred, and then they would have these revivals in the woods. And Charles Grandison Finney would come and speak. He was like this fire and brimstone guy. And 3,000 people would come. And there were bears and panthers in these woods at that time, And they would find a place in the woods, and they would pray and sing and dance and revive for 3 and 4 days in a row. And they didn't have cars to get them there either. This was teeming with religious fervor. I think it's part of what makes our area so interesting. They really believed that in America they could do anything. And that led to a lot of good things happening. This also then became the last leg of escape on the Underground Railroad. And a lot of people don't understand how critical the canal was to the Underground Railroad. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So, as I said, the Erie Canal left an indelible mark on history. And there are a lot of nonfiction books written about the canal. And they're good. There's a lot of them. My favorite is Wedding of the Waters. I think it's magnificent. And I've read them all over the years. But you know, there wasn't any fiction written about the Erie Canal since 1935, Rome Hall by Edmonds. He was the first historic fiction writer about the Erie Canal, but there hasn't been anything since. And as you know, historic fiction is what gets people to pay attention to history. If you throw a story in there, people are more likely, not just the academics, but regular people are more likely to learn their history. So that's why I chose that genre. I remember going to the movies to see the new Harriet Tubman movie. I was so excited. I went to Auburn Community College. I love Auburn, and I was real excited. And I think there was a minute and a half in that whole movie that took place in Auburn. It all took place in Maryland. And I got so frustrated with how little our momentous history is known and recognized on the creative stage. We don't have plays. We don't have musicals. We don't have a lot of books written about upstate New York. So I decided in my own way I would try to do that. The one movie where you will find a canal scene, do you remember the movie How the West Was Won? Yeah, Jimmy Stewart. That has, in the beginning, about 90 seconds of them walking along the canal before they moved west. But it's the only one that I can think of. And, you know, I just hope that by adding a story to our history, that more people will become fascinated with our history, because I think it warrants it. I think particularly right now, it's a good time to have some historic fiction about upstate New York, because I believe that history has the power to inspire. And I think if we've ever had a time where we need inspiration to make America better, it is right now. So I'm hoping my book plays some small role in that happening. Now, I'm Irish, and I had a lot of fun creating Aileen O'Malley. Irish were the only women immigrants who traveled alone. All the other ethnic groups came with families, but the Irish, they were starving. They were losing a fourth of their population, and they could get jobs here. So they came on their own. You'll find in my book, everything is based in real history, but I didn't write it as a history book, okay? But the history is real, and that is part of it. She's searching for her indentured father. He's indentured to work on the canal, and her kidnapped siblings. Kidnapping of children in Ireland in 1830 was common. We call it child trafficking now. It was common in Ireland. The saddest thing, parents would take their kids down to the wharfs and sell them to ship captains. And they would then get lined up on the wharf in New York City, and farmers and others would come down and bid on them and take them as indentured slaves, really, for 3 or 4 years. This was common. They were starving. Now, Aileen was a very strict Catholic. Her grandmother raised her in the faith, okay? And she gets on this boat to come over here, and what happens? She gets sick, and she discovers her 2 best friends are Protestants. My goodness, Protestants are human beings too. So she learns from this, and her 2 best friends really in the whole story are those that she met on that ship. She experiences vicious anti-Catholicism in New York City, which was very prominent at that time. The Irish were poor, they were willing to take lower wages, and they were resented terribly. I mean, Irish Catholics were literally hung on street poles in New York City. There were riots, and that happened. It's part of the history. She experiences anti-Catholicism, violence, loss, and of course, love. She's inspired by the abolitionists of Peterborough. She befriends Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And her journey to America changes her. along with many of the people that she meets along the way. When you think of what an extraordinary moment in time this was, I mean, 1825 to 1861, let's say. I'm 73. That's 30 something. That's a snapshot of time. You know, when you think about it, it's a little period of time from when the canal opened and the Civil War began. And look at what was happening. The Erie Canal opened. The natives were getting pushed out of their land, not just here, but all across America. It was Jacksonian Indian removal period. This burned over district was happening that I just described. And these cities exploded onto the scene. And, you know, if you sent your wheat to New York before the canal and it cost $100, now it costs $1. That was the economic impact that drove Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Rome, Utica. I mean, it was the canal that did that. And there'd never been cities formed this quickly, anywhere in the whole world. The canal was the ultimate economic development. Now, you know, I mentioned some of the revivals and the burned over district stuff. There was also the Millerites. Have you ever heard of them? There were probably 10 different religious groups like this, but the Millerites were fascinating because they set a date when they said the world was going to end. What's that movie? I'm trying to... forgetting that movie. Anyway, they said the world was going to end, and then when it didn't end on the day they picked, they put it off. They said, oh no, we met next October. You know, whatever. But there were thousands and thousands of people. We had the Utica riot, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. The first abolitionist meeting, or the first of the Anti-Slavery Society meets in Utica, and they get badgered out of the place, and that wasn't unusual. The people who owned the mills in the North got their cotton from the South, and they were not in favor of abolition at all. And abolitionist meetings were often really attacked, and it was. But this story is so wonderful that I had to put it in the book, and I had to do this reenactment that I do with my friends from Peterborough. Garrett Smith, who, have you guys heard of Garrett Smith? Yeah. Great. Wealthiest, most influential abolitionist in history. Got shy, people didn't know a lot about him. He was, when you look at what he did. So he went to this meeting in Utica of the abolitionists, and he wasn't sure that he was going to be one. But he wanted to listen. So he's sitting in the back, and these people come and start throwing things and pushing these people out. And he was a big man, he had a great big head. And he went up to the front of the room. He said, "We are Americans. We have the right to free speech." And he looked at everybody in the audience and he said, "Come to Peterborough. I'm going to rent a canal boat. Come to Peterborough. We'll have our meeting there." And he did exactly that. He walked down. He got a lumber barge. And 104 abolitionists got on that lumber barge, traveled on the canal all night long, got out in my little home village of Canastota, which is in the pictures, and walked 9 miles up the hill to Peterborough to form the New York State Anti-Slavery Society. Now, when I first moved to Peterborough, I took a ride, or moved to Canastota, took a ride up to Peterborough, and I met this incredible woman named Dot Wilsey. Yeah, isn't she? She's on power, isn't she? And I told her how intrigued, that I was writing a book, and how intrigued I was with that story. And she looked at me and she said, "Did you know they were singing freedom songs when they went up the hill?" Chills went down my back. She had diaries, farmers heard them singing freedom songs as they walked up the hill to Peterborough and formed the New York State Anti-Slavery Society. So then I said, I gotta have that in the book. And that's why we do this thing every October, and you're all welcome. Look for it. It is such an uplifting experience. We do a reenactment. It's called the Abolition Walk. We do it in early October, and It's a wonderful thing. It really is. We don't walk the whole 9 miles. God knows I couldn't do that. But we take a walk down to the first stop there, like a mile and a half, at Cottville. And we come back and we go to the Erie Canal Brewery and we have an abolition ale and we have a great time. So I'm inviting all of you to come next year. If you love history, you'll love that event. It's really quite wonderful. So let's think about what the environment was like here at that time. You had slave catchers all over New York State. People forget New York had slavery, okay? The Irish famine was going on. As you know, they lost 1/4 of the population. Black farming communities. This was something I didn't know about. This was new research for me. I love teachers. It was a teacher who once told me she thought I could write a book one day. You know, the power of a teacher to influence a child, it just never ceases to amaze me. I met a 7th grade social studies teacher named Jess from the Camden schools when I was up in Peterborough for some event. And she said, well, we're doing research on Florence. What's Florence? She said it's an 80-family Black farming community up near Central Square. And I'm a history nut, okay? I read everything. I had no clue about this. And there were 7 or 8 of these Black farming communities across upstate New York. And Garrett Smith funded them. And he did it because he knew that was the only way they could vote. They had to own land in order to vote. And, you know, so they're doing archaeological digs. They're doing incredible work. God bless her. She's so terrific for those kids. And I became intrigued with that, and that's why that's in the story. But there were many of these across upstate New York. And, of course, they all died with the fugitive slave law because they couldn't. They were targets. You know, they couldn't be there any longer. And of course, there was the massive, massive immigration. I often wonder if the fugitive slave law hadn't passed, what would have happened to these successful Black farming communities. It's intriguing to think about, isn't it? So from this crazy environment, these movements were spawned that we're dealing with to this very day. Women's suffrage movement, I believe, came about because Elizabeth Cady Stanton was Garrett Smith's cousin. Did you know that? Guess where she spent her summers? Peterborough. And where did she meet the Oneida women? Peterborough. They were always welcome in Garrett Smith's home and on his property. So she actually got adopted into the Wolf Clan, as did Matilda Jocelyn Gage. But that's where they saw what a matrilineal society could look like. There was no wife beating in that tribe. You'd get thrown out. You didn't hurt a woman. You didn't do that in that society. Many of us believe this was really the root of the women's suffrage movement. And it happened right here, guys. And of course you had Frederick Douglass up in Rochester. And he spoke here. I believe he spoke in Rome. I know he spoke in Canastota. He was traveling this route all the time. And then you had these utopian experiments popping up. And the one I focus on in my book is the Oneida Community Mansion House. I see nodding heads. You guys are familiar. Chris O'Neill, I understand, just left, but she did an amazing job with that house, and you can stay overnight there. Too freaky for me, but I did do some research sitting in the library there. That library is magnificent with the skylights, etc., and just an incredible, incredible place. But there were 7 or 8 of those utopian communities. Again, part of the Burned-Over District. So all of this contributes to the setting that you recognize in the middle of massive culture change. And there are many similarities with what we're going through today. The seeds of today's discord were planted then. Now, some of the characters in my book you'll recognize. They're real people. Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Garrett Smith, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Stephen Myers, and Ulysses S. Grant. They all lived within 120 miles of each other, right here. I like to imagine them all getting on the same canal boat someday. You know, it could have happened. They went to the same meetings. You know, it's fascinating. Now, Stephen Myers, a lot of people don't know about. Do you know about him? He was the first African-American steward on a Hudson River steamboat. And he and his wife Harriet were remarkable people. His home is on Livingston Avenue in Albany. You can visit it. It's worth a visit. He really started Florence. He was friends with Garrett Smith. And Stephen had such a great reputation that Garrett asked him to help get the Florence Black farming community started, and he did a magnificent job. In his role as a steward, he brought escapees in barrels on ships. And of course, a lot of people forget that Ulysses S. Grant was right up in Sackett's Harbor at the same time. I mean, they were all here. And so I added, these are the characters I created in my book that you'll meet when you read my book. Aileen, of course, Jedediah, her love interest. Gotta have a little romance, right? Betha Dooley is her grandmother in Ireland, and she is my favorite character in the book. And she has an undeniable similarity to my grandmother Anna Quigley. And then we have Joseph Ryan, and doesn't he look like a scoundrel? You gotta have a scoundrel with a mustache. And then Jimmy, her friend, Viney, Rose, her friend, and Leah. Now, Leah is in the book because I was very good friends with Joanne Shenandoah. I see a lot of nodding heads. She was a very, very good dear friend of mine. Her daughter's name is Leah. And I learned at her 40th birthday party, I'll never forget this, it was held in Great Chief Shenandoah's house. You know, Great Chief Shenandoah was 7 feet tall. Yeah, he was something. And he helped to form Hamilton College. The party was there at his house. It was Joanne's 40th birthday, and this big box arrived, and she opened it up, and it was a white guitar from Neil Young of Crosby, Stills, Nash. And at the end of the evening, she took me out back, and there was a fire, and some of the clan mothers were there, and they told me their stories. And it was one of the richest, most fulfilling nights I can ever remember. And I asked them about the canal, because it cut their land in half, okay? And we all know that the horror and the trauma that happened because of that, but it wasn't all negative, what they had to say. They also used the canal to see relatives in other tribes that they couldn't see that often. And I was so struck by the fact that they were so magnanimous in their conversation about it. Something I'll never forget. And I think something that I injected into the book. I tried to not just be political, but to be fair about it. So because I was in economic development for all these years, I wrote this little, you got one over there, Marianne, the little tourism booklet? I wrote this 19-page booklet about coming to upstate New York and experiencing my book in the places where the story unfolds. And it's free, and I have a thing with a QR code so you can download it if you're interested. But I found myself getting invited to speak in places not like here. Like, you guys know Chittenango Falls, and you know these things. I got asked to speak down to the Hudson River Maritime Museum, and they ate this up, and they came, too. They came and visited upstate New York because they were so fascinated. I think if you put place and literature together, you have a much more potent formula. When I read Midnight in the Garden of Evil, the Garden of Good and Evil, I did it in Savannah. Sitting in the squares with the moss hanging down. You know what I mean? Yeah, put it placed together with a story is a really good thing to do. And that's what I tried to do with this little book. I want people to the readers to understand that they can experience the novel right here in upstate New York. So I encourage people, you can go on a real Hudson River steamboat out of Kingston. Bring the book with you, have a good time. I talk about Madison County, my home county, and the places that you can visit there. And of course, I encourage everyone to stop in and get an abolition ale at the Erie Canal Brewery, and to go to Peterborough. Now, Chittenango Falls has a very special place in my heart, and you're going to laugh when you hear why. I fell off Chittenango Falls when I was in 8th grade with my best friend, Mary Snyder. And we landed about halfway down on a landing, and the I don't know who came with this big crane, and they had the little.
Oh,
if you're a chubby 8th grader, you know. Oh my God, what a day! What a day! But the place is very special to me for that reason. So, the most emotional scene in my book takes place at Chittenango Falls, and that's why. That's where she comes to terms with herself, and I encourage people to go there, have a picnic, read that part of the book, and then stop at the Chittenango Boat Landing Museum on the way home. Of course, Cazenovia still looks like it did when my book was written. I mean, it's kind of amazing. And the orchard is there, where the convention was held, which is an astounding piece of history. You can go into the restaurant, Maryland. Thank you, Lakeland. The Lakeland House was there at the time this all happened, so you can go in and have tea, and you can read parts of the book to one another. And then I encourage people to go to the Oneida Mansion House. It really is extraordinary. The descendants of eugenics experiments live there still. And they will talk to you and I have learned so much at that place. It is absolutely astounding. And of course, it became the Oneida Silverware Company, one of the most successful companies in the world. If you go into Fayetteville, you can go to Matilda Jocelyn Gage's house, and down the hill where Freedom of Espresso is, that is where the happy days of Aileen's life. Aileen and Jedediah are married, and they set up a mercantile store on the feeder canal in Fayetteville. And it's a particularly happy time in their life. The village was full of mills at that time, and it's a very interesting history there. You can go to Syracuse, of course, where they have the only real Erie Canal Museum that exists. There's other takeoffs, but that's the real deal there at the Erie Canal Museum. And there's many, many other things to see there. I really had no idea until I wrote this book how many opportunities there are to get out on the water on the Erie Canal. From Buffalo, Rochester's full of them. They have Cornhill Navigation. If you haven't been to Fairport lately, do yourselves a favor. What a sweet canal town that is. And they built these senior condos right there on the canal. A friend of mine invited me to go. And you see people riding by on their bikes and kayaking, and there's the canal, and they walk over the bridge to this wonderful little town where there's like 6 Irish bars and 5 restaurants. It's a great place, a wonderful place to visit. Herkimer, of course. There's wonderful opportunities to get out on the water, and I encourage people to do that. You can go west. Aileen and Jedediah fell in love in Palmyra, where they met tragedy, but also found their love for one another. And a short jaunt to the south will take you to Seneca Falls, which really also remains much as it was in those days, and there's some wonderful canal boat rides you can take there. I just had the great pleasure of being in Buffalo for the World Canal Conference. They asked me to come and speak on novel tourism, which is one of my favorite subjects. And there were people from 56 countries at the World Canal Conference. And they asked me to meet the foreign visitors in New York City and come up with them. Now, I shouldn't have done that because I was on a bus for 5 days and they pinched a nerve in my neck. Anyway, it was a great experience. And watching the Seneca Chief take off, unbelievable. And it was done so well with the Seneca Nation. In fact, the night before the launch, we went up to Seneca Bluffs and they planted a white pine, which is the tree of peace, and a rainbow came out. It's one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And the next day they spoke, the Seneca Nation spoke, and talked about the fact that yes, history is full of trauma, and history is full of wonder, and we have to push forward in a positive way. And it was absolutely wonderful, a great experience. Now, I'm lucky, I have a little cottage on the eastern shore of Lake Ontario, in a very unknown place called Ontario Point. And I have a scene in the book where Elaine and her daughter, Bessie, make sand maps of their lives. They have, here's Ireland, and then they have, and I encourage people to go on to Southwick Beach because you'll feel like you're at the ocean. And make sand maps of your own lives. It's a lot of fun. If you have not been to Oswego lately, go. I went to college there. That's where I got my 4-year degree. And I feel very comfortable in saying it was a dump. Because it was a dump. It was a fun dump, but it was a dump. This young mayor who went in there, this Billy Barlow kid, he has revitalized that city. They opened that city up to the lake. They have rooftop restaurants. That Breitbach Park is just amazing. It is wonderful to see what young leadership can do when they're determined, and he certainly did there. Now, the reason that I encourage Oswego is this. Garrett Smith owned half of the wharf in Oswego. He owned the whole eastern half. He's a very wealthy man. And that's where the last leg of the Underground Railroad would happen, because they would bring the escapees from the barn in Peterborough, and the barn's still there, and they can show you where they hid, up the Oswego Feeder Canal, and then they would get put on ships that Garrett Smith had control over and taken to Canada. So it was a very important route on the Underground Railroad, and he also donated the library there. I have had so much fun visiting libraries. We have such wonderful libraries in upstate New York. They're unbelievable. The one in Oswego might top the list. The architecture is breathtaking. It was his gift to this city of Oswego with one condition. They had to allow African Americans to use that library. And at that time, that was revolutionary. And that's what he did. And it's a wonderful library to just pop in and see. The architecture and the feeling is wonderful. And then, of course, I bet most of you have been to the Seward Mansion. Yeah. I go to historic homes everywhere I travel. I love them. But most historic homes they were sold at one point, and all the belongings were auctioned away, and then they try to recreate them, buying back and putting it together. Not the Seward Mansion. Everything is there. I mean, just as it was, the silverware, the china, everything is there. Lincoln's handwritten Emancipation Proclamation with William Seward's notes on it is in that house in Auburn, New York. Our history, I can't say it enough, our history is amazing. And Dreams of Freedom is really about this, and I have some bookmarks here that you're all welcome to, and the bookmark says this. This is really the theme of my book. The task is before you. Put your good mind, strong constitution, and sensitive heart to the task of making this a better land. And that's my reason for writing it. And it's kind of my love letter to upstate New York, because I love upstate New York. And it's the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal, so I hope it's a good time to reflect upon that. I ordered a bunch of books, and they didn't get delivered. But what I have, thanks to my cousin, Marianne, I have these holiday boxes, and they're just $25, and they contain the book, the Erie Canal poster, some Paul de Lima coffee, some cozy socks. So if you have someone who moved away that you want to give an upstate New York Christmas present to, feel free. And if you want to buy the book, just write down your name and address, and I will mail it to you. Okay? And I'll make sure you get it, because they're gonna arrive today. Can you imagine? Here I am with all of you, and they probably are sitting on my porch and the stove right now. But I will get them to the post office and mail them to you if you would like one. So I'm happy to take questions. Is that what we do now? Did I talk too long? No. Oh, good. Happy to answer questions.
I grew up in Central New York, as most of us probably did. I feel like we know you. You are a part of us, and you are a friend to all of us because you have brought all those wonderful memories back to us, and I thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. It warms my heart. I got a call from the lady in Little Falls yesterday. She's 84. She said, I just want to tell you, your book is a fast read. I said, well, that's good. And she said, and no one ever wrote a book about my town before. And that just like what you just said, it really warms my heart, you know? It really does.
Do you have cards?
Yes, right over there with QR codes and all that technology. Yes.
Is the book available as a Kindle version?
Yeah, the Kindle version is on Amazon. Yep, you can always get the book from Amazon. Actually, if I have to mail it, it's going to cost about the same, but I'd rather mail them to you and know that you got them. So if you're interested, please do write down your name and address, and I'll make sure you get one. Okay? Oh, yes, absolutely. I'll sign every single one of them. Okay?
And all the ones in the gift bag are signed.
Got it. Well, thank you. I can't remember a nicer.
I'd like to thank Marilyn for bringing this area back to us again. Sometimes we never appreciate it. Well, excuse me. We don't really appreciate what we have around us, and I think today's presentation definitely gives us pause to think and maybe visit some of the places that she mentioned. Thank you again. May I have a motion to adjourn? Marge Palmer. Can I have a second? Carol Fiola. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.